Hey, everybody. I'm David Bloom, co founder of Next TMT Talks, with my co founder Daniel Frankel here. And our midweek look in with Media Play News. We are joined this week by Sig Luft, who is the CEO and a bunch of other important titles with one of the more interesting CDNs, content distribution networks out there, NetSkrt, and that is missing a vowel. So I'll let Sig describe what he did with that up there in Vancouver. But they solve some really interesting problems for particularly live sports. And we're going to talk more generally beyond that on a wide range of other issues. But some of the challenges facing streamers, particularly with this new super hot space of live sports. So let's get started, Sig, if we could. Just talking a little bit about where you guys came from and how it's evolved and how you got to this live sports thing, which is a big challenge for a lot of companies.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Just background wise, I've grown up in the networking side of the world and have always been party to edge delivery, edge policy control, edge compute. So myself and my two co-founders, we decided to move up the stack to layer 7, and we started looking at problems in the CDN space. Our view was that there's a number of problems deeper into the network that CDNs currently don't solve, and that's where we got started. Out of that work, we caught the attention of a number of OTTs in general that were moving into the sports space. And sports creates a whole lot of new problems, and edge is a word that they like. And we got into dealing with live sports events about 3 years ago, and it was a lot of the technology we developed for the edge that made that possible.
So, Sig, just to be clear, I always think about CDNs as this place where you park a lot of content ahead of time, right?
Mhm.
And you can serve it quicker just because of latency, or just the most popular content is located as close as possible on this vast internet to the people who are likely to be looking for it. That's hard to do, obviously, when it's a live thing. You can't do the third minute of the game in the first minute, things like that.
Well, there's definitely been a shift in terms of the requirements when you move from traditional video on demand. And there's definitely a benefit to having the stored media close to the consumer. But there's a difference between, am I in the same state or in the same county or maybe the same city where the consumption is occurring for video on demand? All of the above can probably solve the problem. It's when you get to the live sports where the latency really matters. And so you're talking about getting from hundreds to tens down to single digit milliseconds.
You know,
That's
we hear
that's
about
where
these major meltdowns. So I won't get into specific case studies, but they make headlines when they do happen. Are the
yeah.
problems mainly in the edge? Is that why you're out there? Or
It definitely is one area where there can be a lot of problems, particularly if the edges themselves or the networks themselves are, 2 or 3 or 4 steps away from where the content originates. So if you imagine a live sports event and every consumer on the left-hand side is watching this event and they all have to come from well beyond the network boundary that these five live in, this whole flow is coming across many hops of the network. Many times, things like inter-exchanges are traversed, and these are typically nonprofit in many cases the further down the food chain you go. So they're all designed to run at 90% efficiency. These live sports events, when you have this many people coming all the way through, you're seeing things like a 10x. And 10x on a 90% utility model doesn't work.
That still leaves 10% in trouble, basically, because it's everybody coming at once. It's like that old issue when Victoria's Secret first started doing those live things. There might have been people looking at women in skivvies for a long time, but they were doing it in their own time instead of all at once, and all at once melted a few a few internet connections. They just couldn't handle it. And it's the same thing with the Super Bowl or another big sports event, or Jake Paul being punched in the face again on Netflix or whatever.
So that's where you start to see problems really start. And so being a CDN that focuses on the edge and places that have these problems, you're simply taking the many streams coming through and making it one coming through and then fanning out at the point of consumption. So latency and proximity start to make a difference here. In some cases, just the simple friction through the network is what needs to be solved. In other cases, latency is always good. Maybe not for watching a movie, but if it's a live event, every transaction that goes back and forth adds up, and so latency becomes
When
Right.
it's the headlines, it seems like on an engineering level, these big companies aren't prepared. But is it something where you have to live it and do it to see where the problems are, see where the fault lines are?
To be honest, I think there's a little bit of truth to that. I remember back in the day when I was in the networking space, Juniper was a big company, and they literally ran their protocols for months and months and months doing nothing. They just kind of sat on the side just to see, because nobody could create a test environment that big. And in a sense, is a parallel to this type of environment where, no, I'm just going to throw in my lab 50 terabits of capacity and see what happens. It's a little tough to do. So yeah, I think you're quite right.
Yeah, you can't simulate.
So how do you do that then? How do you like what are some lessons learned for you guys in terms of optimizing the special sauce as much as you can talk about it that changes and makes it more efficient because this is not going away. Everybody's going to streaming of live sports and other live events. Netflix is only the biggest one making this shift, but a whole bunch of others are. Certainly Amazon's got NBA games and NFL games and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of interest in it being available in the second it's being played because you got a bunch of gamblers out there and they don't want to, they get really mad if there's a delay, for instance. And that's not going to necessarily motivate you, but it certainly puts an emphasis on quality and latency reduction.
Yeah, it's definitely we care. Every CEO has to say that, I think, but in reality, we do. What it really comes down to is proximity. Can you get your functions where they need to be? Number one. And then number two is, can you precisely direct those requests to the right place? It's one thing to have a bunch of capacity really close to the users, and then you go send the request somewhere else. So those are sort of the two dimensions that we really focus on.
Could you characterize what you've seen in terms of a uptick in live sports, live events? Because there are other kinds of live events that are also getting more and
Mhm.
more streaming demand than ever, and Netflix is not the only one that signaled that they're going to dive into that hard. So, give me some
Yeah.
sense good about the change in volume for you guys that you're seeing through your pipes.
Well, it is a very obvious spike. You know, we see 10x quite frequently, and it is kind of a challenge for the industry. You have these massive spikes that last for a short period of time, a few hours, and then you have to wait another week or so till the next one happens. So, from an industry point of view, the OTTs are, this is my personal opinion, but they're shifting they're shifting from just being a VOD type of service, which they dominate. 50% of all media is consumed over the internet now, from broadcast being 50 still,
Yeah.
and internet. The bottleneck has always been sports, live, news. Anything that was live was always deemed a bit of a challenge. And I think because the video on demand was developed in such a way that give it a few seconds, give it 30 seconds, and then start watching, it'll be fine for the rest of the hour or two. They've improved that, obviously, but bottom line is it has always been a this versus that. Now, as we get into the live sort of model, you've had a lot of things like fast channels, live linear. You know, if you buy a TV from Samsung or LG, you get like 10,000 channels. I won't comment on the quality of the channels, but they're all there. That works because the audience on those channels is quite small, relatively speaking, but it is live, to be fair. Where the next step of going to live sports events really crack the code, if you will, is that suddenly you do have to solve all the problems that people have ignored. That's really what I think is very fascinating about the emergence of these live sporting events, these next problems that these OTTs are starting to focus on delivering this way. So what Netflix encountered, I think, is a reasonable growing pain from all accounts. They
Oh yeah.
got it right.
I mean, it didn't make anybody happier, but it's like any reasonable person would go, "Oh, you're going to throw 60 million people onto something. It's going to be a bit of a challenge for the network, right?" I mean, That's just what it is. And it's
Well,
one of the
not
first things
just
you do.
Netflix. I mean, you've got all these teams that are thrown out of their regional sports network. They're streaming now, and whether it's leagues or individual franchises, they're in the market too.
Yeah, yeah, no, there. So the way I see it is that the last shoe has fallen on the, on the history of broadcast. I think with live sports right now, it's very much specific to these big events. But if you can solve those big events, everything else comes easy. And so that's kind of where I think the industry is shifting. You will see more and more going to OTT will be 100% of the distribution over time. And certainly the technical hurdles have been solved. And there's some commercial issues out there. I'm not going to say that it's going to change overnight, but when you look at the commercial issues, I think that a lot of these sports events come as the anchor revenue source to cable companies, and nobody's going to give it up because of this, that, and the other thing. So it's not going to happen overnight. But the first step is that the networks are capable of handling it, and they're doing so with very high profile events.
Yeah, it's possible now, right? I mean, that's the thing. Now it's possible. And there are some economies that will start to kick in and some benefits from being able to do that at a very high level of competency. I'm
Mhm.
curious what you're bringing. We've got this, I've heard there's a big conference going on in Las Vegas beginning this weekend, and that
Yes.
you are among the stampede of horses heading to Las Vegas. So, what are you guys bringing to the show, and what are you expecting to see more generally? Like any trends or themes or things that you guys are surfing at this point?
Well, we have a couple speaking engagements, so that's just more of participating in the industry and much like this, sharing some of our views. Behind the scenes, it's a small world we live in. We have meetings with the people we want to have meetings with. So that's for us, it's a more of a business development type of exercise. In terms of are there going to be some surprises coming out? There's some announcements out there today. I think there's obviously the big topics right now are FIFA World Cup. Everybody's talking about that. The global aspect of it is in terms of distribution is certainly topics we're hearing. The announcement, I think it was today, about Globestar with
So,
Amazon.
yeah.
I suspect people will be talking about that. For us, it's indicative of the problems that are out there, but I don't know that it necessarily touches our toes too much.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because it's easy to forget here in America, even as MLS gets more popular and more awareness of the English Premier League and, all the rest, how freaking big the World Cup is worldwide. I mean,
Yeah.
I think there's the Super Bowl and that's big, but the 47 games or whatever it is of the World Cup, that's so much bigger. It's over more than a month of time. It's been building up for 3 years. This is gigantic. And for you guys, it's more than the Super Bowl. It's the biggest thing for some of the companies you deal with.
In terms of the number of events, it is much, much bigger. So we look at it from the perspective, or I think all CDNs look at it from the perspective of how many times are we going to be called upon to light up those pipes. And obviously more is better. But in terms of soccer in general, or football as the rest of the world calls it, we we see massive events. I think we've carried well over 500 events in the last 12 months. South America has big soccer events. Like they go crazy there. I think they did a Serie A league change things this past year so that they actually spread the games around almost a whole year now. And it's just because it's so popular. There's so many events that I think somebody told me that the teams are complaining because they're playing too much.
Right. Now, I recall that Vancouver's hosting a number of the matches. Los Angeles has got, I think, at least a half a dozen. But the fact that in three countries are host countries, Mexico, United States, and Canada, and multiple cities in each one only adds to some of the complications for the companies producing all the content that will go out around the planet, right?
I mean, I've heard there's two sides to this problem. Speaking to some of the network folks here in town, and there's one piece which is getting all of that content generated and pushed out to the world. Then there's the other side of the problem where we live, which is now it's coming at you, and now you have to. Right. Yeah, it is definitely topic number one in this space.
I
Now
bet.
you're situated up there safely in British Columbia, away from our policy disruption here in the United States, but not too insulated. I mean, it may be there'll be active discussion about how the FCC is trying to keep the NFL and other sports leagues in broadcast.
Hmm.
About that, and there's also the FCC support for satellite broadband, which
Yeah,
is in the news today with Amazon buying Globalstar for nearly $12 billion. How would that
yeah.
affect your business, and what do you see coming?
Well, I don't see it being a major impact. Well, speaking about the Globestar piece of it, the way I look at satellite broadcast is, or not broadcast, satellite transmission. They've solved the last mile problem, but you still have to fill the last mile. So most satellite systems that I'm aware of have multiple ground stations, and that's where the signals go up. So unless there's going to be some computational aspect within the satellite system that will do more traditional multicast type functionality, it will all generate from the ground, and every eyeball request will come to the ground and then go up to the satellite system and then come back down. It is in a good bad effect of the over the top approach. Everybody has their own dedicated circuit is the best way to think about it, and the network
That's like
can't.
the old telephone setup, right? I mean, the plain old telephone system kind of thing where you had a dedicated circuit for each phone number and it had to go through there as opposed to the internet protocol, which allowed you to find different things and route around the damage famously and all that. So it's a different dynamic.
It's a different dynamic. So relatively speaking, Globestar, at least from my vantage point, is a better, more reachable phone line. Is your analogy. There's undoubtedly things that'll happen down the road, but if they can solve just the pipe problem, it'll be just a pipe solution.
It'll certainly make it easier to watch World Cup on top of Whistler, right?
Yeah, yeah. Although Whistler's got pretty good fiber up there.
They've got pretty good fiber.
Speaking just broadly in terms of the current paradigm of cable DOCSIS networks and fiber fiber networks and 5G, 6G, and then you come along and it has this very powerful government support for this new technology. Is this a better mousetrap, or is it just favored by certain oligarchs? What's your opinion?
Well, no comment on the last statement, but I think the challenge with any wireless technology, whether it's coming from space or flying across towers, is there's only so much air, right? Spectrum, and they all use certain bands, and there is a limit. I think when you're dealing with space, it's maybe a little bit better because there's a bigger fan out. Whereas if you have a cell tower, the concentration of those endpoints is obviously more dense. But bottom line is spectrum is not unlimited, and there will always be some challenges there. It will be kind of interesting to see when we've got too many of those low Earth orbit satellites flying around. How much not necessarily they collide, but how that spectrum is managed around the world.
More of a bandwidth collision than a physical collision, though we have written, Dan has expounded alarmingly on the Kessler syndrome, invoking the movie Gravity, where space debris hits something else and causes this cartwheeling
Yeah.
additional sets of problems. And, Elon Musk has applied for putting up to 1 million new satellites up there just for Starlink, which feels like a lot.
I'm just looking at Sandra Bullock. That's all that is.
Sandra Bullock will fix everything. I'm not worried about that. She fixed everything. She's hyper competent and also a broadcast engineer. I don't know if you knew that. But that being said, I do think it's a big deal and puts another major multi-trillion dollar company stepping up to what Elon's trying to pull off with Starlink. And that at least gets us into another kind of duopoly. But what you're saying, Sig, that I think is interesting and on point here is yes, they've moved there. That's great. That's a great way to reach lots of people in lots of out of the way places that can't be reached by more traditional dig a hole, put a fiber thing in there or DOCSIS cable or whatever. It's just doesn't economically make sense. But there's still limits there that aren't the same as the systems that we've come to know in the last 15 or 20 years. There's going to have to be, we're going to need both, right?
It moves the yard posts out.
Yeah.
There's no critique. It's a good thing. I think there's lots of examples around the world where who knew it was going to be that useful, but it will reach limits. Is all I'm saying. And in terms of, as long as these streaming events continue to be point to point connections, somebody's got to start those points. And they're not all going to go back to, the Bay Area, and Netflix does not broadcast everything from their headquarters. They are distributed in thousands. I don't know what they're up to, but last time I looked, which was a few years ago, they had 6 or 8,000 caches distributed around the world. And that's where the fan out occurs. With live sports, well, maybe they don't need, if they're at 6 or 10,000 of these caches, maybe they need to get to 50 or 100, because you got to get further and further and further out to
50 or 100,000, not
I'm not.
a larger number than,
It needs to continue to grow.
right.
Um, and it's irrelevant whether it's connecting to a cellular network, whether it's connecting to a satellite network, or whether it's connecting to a fiber network. The more eyeballs on the end of it, the greater the need to reduce any friction to get to those eyeballs. And that typically means getting caches closer.
So I won't name specific outfits, but let's say a Burbank-owned media conglomerate decides to make a one-off deal for an NFL playoff game and get it exclusively on their platform.
Mhm.
Is the deal signed and things move forward without the league ever checking if they have the network bona fides? And they kind of like sign a deal that will get 20, 25 million exclusive eyeballs and then worry about it later? Or
Mhm.
is this audited on a content?
I mean, I can't speak to that myself. I'm not in those rooms, but I would speculate that signing a big deal like that would include certain minimum
Due
select.
diligence. You got to do some due diligence on that.
Well, there'd be due diligence, but I would imagine that if you're telling the NFL, well, the way you used to do it worked fine, but we're going to do it differently now, and we'll reach at least 50% of the same people. It's like, I don't think they'll agree to that. Okay, we'll reach 90% of the same people. Well, okay, show me how you get to 99, and if we can figure out that there's a reasonable journey to 99% or 100%, then we'll do it. But if the answer is, we'll see what we do, I'm sure you're not getting that contract, or you're paying a hell of a lot more money for it.
Yeah, the NFL not doing a lot of speculation on those things, are they?
No, it's their bread and butter, and I would imagine if it's an exclusive deal, that's probably the most powerful scenario. That well, what's the again, I'm speculating here, but I would think that on the table is, if you don't hit those numbers, you're not exclusive. I need a second source.
Yeah,
You have
right.
discussions with the leagues at this point? I know you're out there talking to all the major streaming companies, but are you talking to the NFL, NBA, without getting specific at that
No,
level?
we tend to be, the pecking order is the distributor of the content cuts the deal starting with the stadium, right? The stadium typically will have cameras and da 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 da. So the feeds come in, they encode it, they distribute it to whatever markets they have, and then it eventually hits CDNs, who make that final push out the door. So, if nothing else, I'm so many rings away from those conversations. It's much more technical, and can you do this? Can you do that? Can you
It's
get it?
probably why you smile so much.
Yes, there's some days where you're just
You're still
smiling.
gritting your teeth.
It's just, what else can I do?
What else could I do? Right. This is out of my hands. Speaking of which, there's a lot going on elsewhere beyond just Las Vegas. So it's hard to believe. It is hard to believe that it's not all about NAB. Though they have some opinions. There's a Sacramento U.S. federal judge making a decision about whether that NextStart Tegna thing goes forward, and whether it matters that Congress had a cap on ownership breach. And it was just sort of like, oh, you guys go ahead on, double it. And I think one of the things that gets interesting from your all standpoint, broadcasting is really the original distribution
Mhm.
mechanism. What's your view? Because you are so involved in the new generation of ways to get stuff to people. Does broadcast still have a significant role, or is this kind of like a rear guard action in some ways?
Well, I mean, one of the comments I've heard from customers of ours that have a foot in both camps is, you get that initial feed coming from the stadium, if we're sticking with the sports story. That comes in, and now it fans out into here's how I go over my broadcast network, over my satellite network, over my ITV network, over my da 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 da. Da. Each of those encoding points is a cost center. And then each of the relationships with this network, I got to maintain those radio towers all over the states and da 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 da. I have to cut my deals with the cable companies and da da. Every one of those divergent approaches is a cost center.
Right.
So there's
And it's friction too, right? I mean, it's another set of organizational friction as opposed to necessarily latency challenges or whatever, but it's that too. I mean, you've got to get that stuff.
So I think there's sort of a utopian scenario here where I do it one way and it solves everything. And when it finally hits those networks, well, those networks have been tooled for internet and there's some optimization, but the origin to the eyeball is the same then. So I think that a lot of cost savings eventually get to one way of doing it.
Certainly seeing a lot of announcements about shifting broadcast structures and workflows and all that here ahead of the show about things like IP driven stuff. And that is really going to what you're suggesting here, right? Getting that IP, the Internet Protocol approach is the way you start to rationalize some of those costs down and get you across multiple distribution methods beyond that, right? So that's the vision.
I mean, we saw this from the 90s on when I was a young engineer when DSL first showed up, and the problem they couldn't figure out was, well, my phone line is 64 kilobits or 56, whichever.
Well, those were the days, weren't they?
Oh yeah, and then they say, how do I sell the exact same two pairs of copper, but they can do a megabit? Good God, that's 10, 20 times more data over the
Yeah.
same two pieces of copper. I can't charge 10 times the price? So it started there, but now you look at it and we're doing this over the internet. This is all IP what we're doing right now. Every
Yeah.
time you pick up a phone, it's actually
Yeah.
doing right. That's just naturally going to become a piece of the puzzle. Broadcast doesn't have to be.
Well, and
Private.
there's still some stuff going on in this transition. I mean, we see all of a sudden a bunch of notables in Hollywood said, "Oh, maybe this Paramount Warner Brothers deal wouldn't be a good deal, and we're going to put something up now." 2 months after the deal was finalized with Paramount, and 6 months after we began this stuff. I mean, Hollywood's just going through it. Josh D'Amaro's confirmed 1,000 layoffs in the marketing department at Disney, which is a little shocking to me. Is like they had 1,000 people to get rid of in the
Yeah.
marketing department. Your marketing guy might be going, "Whoa, let's not get carried away with that, kids."
Yeah. Look out, Kevin. You're a pro rata
On a pro
equivalent.
rata basis, he's losing at least an arm. So, but it is part of this ongoing sort of shifts that are happening in Hollywood, right? And so, moving, for instance, to IP is a way to save money. That doesn't mean you have to lay people off. It saves you money. It saves you time and effort and some of the friction of just having to do those deals, right? I mean, that's actually one of the things that I think David Ellison has talked about in terms of we're going to get on one cloud and one tech stack and one cloud provider, and we can save $500 million or some crazy number like that just doing that. And those seem like shockingly large numbers. Didn't anybody figure this out before? It feels like that would be an obvious one, but is that the numbers he talks about, or do those make sense in terms of this, combining on single tech stacks, combining on single cloud providers, things like that?
I mean, I couldn't speak to the specifics, but in principle, yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
people are spending a lot of money on maintaining legacy systems.
Yeah.
I suppose since we're at NAB, maybe we need to be careful because last time I walked around NAB, there were a lot of radio towers and
Yeah, there were.
all sorts of technologies that we're arguing could become obsolete.
Right. Yeah.
Fortunately,
There are a lot of line service trucks and, boxes that go in neighborhoods and things like, yeah, there's a lot of that stuff. It's a little
well,
bit
I
like
mean,
going to,
It's
yeah,
an emotional
there's
discussion for
somewhere
folks,
the
for sure.
physical world has to exist. That part
it has
doesn't
to
change.
exist. Yes. To get to the
Uh,
virtual world, you need the physical world. We
yeah,
haven't gotten beyond that.
Yeah, so there's all of that there, but whether or not it's an analog distribution or even a digital distribution protocol that is a broadcast-based protocol, that's where I think IP, which has to be two-way, will start to erode.
I think that's probably a good place to wrap this up. We are here with Sig Luft, CEO and much else for NetSkrt, which is a CDN, content distribution network that specializes in live sports, the hot new thing for streamers around the universe, it feels like, here on the eve of NAB in Las Vegas. And I am David Bloom with Next TMT, and here with my co-founder, Daniel Frankel. We are here and our midweek look-in with our partners at Media Play News. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Oh, I bet you got some comments on this one. But go check out what Sig's got rolling. It looks pretty interesting, and this is definitely where things are headed, even in broadcasting. So with that, thank you guys very much. We are over and out.
Thanks, everybody.